Alrighty, so we're back to wrap up this lecture, kind of introing web servers. And in the last video, we left off at the terminal. And this is where we left off in the last video, but really where this entire class begins. You're going to be spending the next few weeks getting really comfortable working in the terminal. It's very important that you are confident and comfortable working in the terminal, especially when you're dealing with working with and managing modern web servers. This is your tool set. The better you are at working in the terminal and knowing the commands and the shortcuts and how to be efficient in the terminal, the better systems administrator you're going to be. So it's very important that you spend a lot of time learning the terminal if you're not already familiar with it. And we're going to talk about some commands and a lot of other things later on in the videos. But right now, if you're on a Mac, you have terminal already built in. You can just search for the terminal app and open it up, and you can, boom, play around with your with a Linux or Unix shell. It's right there on Mac OS X. It's built on top of Unix, so you can mess around with it right there. If you're on Windows, you're going to have a little bit more difficult time getting this stuff set up. What you will have to do is download a piece of software called PuTTY, which is essentially a Linux terminal application for Windows, but you'll have to set up a server before you'll be able to play around with this stuff, because Windows is not Linux based, so the underlying architecture of the operating system does not allow for the types of things that we're going to be doing in this class. And we'll get to that in a little bit. So this is the terminal window. This is essentially how everyone dealt with operating systems before Windows was available, before the graphical user interface. This is how people told their computers what to do. So it's no exception, and in this class, this is mostly how we're going to be telling our computers, in this case web servers, what to do. So here is a screenshot of a bunch of files. That seems pretty obvious, but this would essentially be the terminal equivalent of opening up a folder and looking at it. And if you see up on the third line down, the second line down, you see the command that was issued after the $, cd/etc/apache2/extra. So what I'm essentially telling the computer to do there is to change directories cd into etc apache2 extra. So each of those is a directory, and I want to click through each of those directories, and I'm doing air quotes when I say click here, because you're not really clicking, you're typing, and it will take us to that. So once I issue this cd, this change directory command, and I tell it what directory to change to, now all of a sudden, if you look below that, you'll see there's a little extra by my name, by Ciardo, and that's because I'm in the extra directory. And now if I issue the command ls -al, it will list all the files in that directory for me. And you can see that below. It's listed the files, who owns them, how large they are, and the last time they were modified. So this is essentially how we browse files on the terminal. This is how we browse around our operating system. We use the cd command, the change directory command, to move into different directories on our machine. And then we use the ls command to view the files and folders inside those directories. So basically, the entire time we're interacting with the terminal and interacting with our computer, we're issuing small commands like these to get it to tell us information or to take us places within the system. So one of the commands that you're going to become really familiar with in this class is SSH. And SSH stands for Secure Shell, and it uses public key encryption to essentially make a connection to a server and allow you to operate a shell on that particular server. So if we were to type SSH username at server, we would fill in that with the details of our server and connect to that. Our shell would actually be, instead of looking at our local machine, we would be looking at the server. So instead of changing directories to etc Apache to extra on our own machine, we'd be changing directories on our remote server and executing commands that way. And I'll show you guys an example of this in a little bit when we connect up to our Rackspace instance. The other thing you're most likely going to be doing a lot of in this class is installing software on these machines. And it's a little bit different than how you typically install software. You're not going to be putting a CD into the CD drive. A lot of times these servers do not have CD drives. And you're also not going to be downloading things from the App Store because there's no graphical user interface. But we do have we have a couple of mechanisms for installing software on our Linux machines. There's two real ways we can do it. We can either compile our software onto the machine we want, or we can use package management software to do that. I highly recommend using package management software to do this. Package management software, in particular Aptitude or apt-get in our case, has pre-compiled versions of all the popular software platforms that we would need to run on our Linux machine. And that includes Apache and other things like PHP and Ruby, and I could go on and on. So if we opt not to use package management, we then have to compile our software for the particular server that we're on. So if you have a Windows machine and you download a .exe off the internet, the .exe file, or that executable file, is essentially a compiled version of the software that is specifically built to run on Windows. That software was probably written in a different language. It was probably written in C or C++, and then compiled down to run on a Windows machine. And typically when we compile down, we're compiling to a processor, and we're also compiling to an operating system. So in the instance of Linux, when you start compiling software, you have to be very aware of the underlying operating system you're using, what other pieces of software are installed, and what type of processor you have. Is it a 32-bit processor or a 64-bit processor? Is it an Intel or an AMD? Or all of these things change how we have to compile our software, which is typically why we don't want to have to compile software. Now, eventually you will have to compile something because the package won't be available, or you just don't have a choice. And that's kind of that's another lesson all in and of itself. So for the most part, we are going to focus on Aptitude, which is the default package management system on the Debian Linux installations, particularly Ubuntu, which is what we'll be using in this class. And I'll get more into these commands a little bit later, but essentially apt-get and apt-cache are our primary Linux commands that we'll use to search for and install software. So that's a really basic primer to the terminal and to what you can expect when we get in there. In the next video, we're actually going to get our hands dirty with Rackspace, the terminal window. We're actually going to get a really quick and dirty website up, all in the next video, and that will kind of transition nicely into your first lab assignment, which will be essentially doing just that, making sure all of your systems are in place, that you can get Rackspace going, and that you can SSH into your server. So stay tuned for those videos coming up down below. We're going to hop out of the slides and into the lab, and we're going to do a little bit of hacking on these servers. So we'll see you guys in the next video.